She was beaten for speaking English until a silent gunslinger taught her to speak without fear. The sky above Las Piedras was the kind that blistered skin and burned secrets. The land lay hard and wide quiet like a wound that never closed, dust-choked blister hot and swollen with silence. Somewhere out past the mesquite fence, a cicada cried and wouldn't stop. Esperanza knelt by the stone path scrubbing blood from flagstones that weren't hers. Her hands were raw, her eyes dry. Behind her, the whitewashed walls of the preacher's house cast no shadow, only judgment. She muttered something under her breath, a line in English she had practiced 100 times. But this time she said it out loud. "I didn't mean no harm, sir. I was only trying." A bootstep cracked behind her. The air thickened. Her spine went rigid. She turned her head slow, too slow. Mr. Wendell stood in the doorway, eyes cold, hand twitching. "Say that again, girl." Esperanza's mouth opened. No sound came, not yet. But she had spoken, and he had heard. That was the sin. That night, someone would bleed for it. And come sunrise, a man with a bounty rifle and an old wound would find her shackled to the fence like a stray. And this time she would speak. The preacher's land bled into the dust like it had been poured wrong fences, 2 wide rows of cotton too dry, and a chapel that leaned like it was tired of blessing liars. Las Piedras sat 3 miles east, but it might as well have been 3 lifetimes for a girl like Esperanza. At 17, she moved like someone who'd learned not to take up space. Her steps were careful, her hands faster than most men's wives. But her mind wandered, especially when she cleaned near the library. They never let her inside the chapel's side room unless it was to scrub, but the wall was thin, and Reverend Wendell had a bad habit of leaving windows cracked. Esperanza would pause her hands just for a breath or two and let the English trickle through the gap like river water in drought. She collected syllables like they were coins, stored them in her chest, rolled them under her tongue in the barn, whispering to the oxen when no one was near. "Pardon me, ma'am. I didn't catch that. The verdict was unjust, Your Honor. Speak clear and stand tall." It wasn't mimicry. It was armor. Because Esperanza knew what it was to be looked at and not seen spoken to, but never asked. That morning started like the rest. She woke before the rooster, hauled water, stoked the stove. The preacher's wife tossed her a half-burned tortilla and said something about the floor being a disgrace before the Lord. Esperanza nodded, didn't speak. Around noon, the post-rider came by. A new one. Young, freckled, with a lazy drawl. He dismounted, whistling, and paused when he saw her kneeling near the porch, scrubbing dirt from under the steps. "Excuse me, miss," he called. "Which way's the trail headin' to Brazos Fork?" She looked up, blinking, and without thinking answered in English. 2 miles west, by the dead cottonwood. Then you follow the river cut." The boy smiled, much obliged. She smiled back barely, and turned back to her work, unaware that a shadow had fallen over the screen door. Mr. Wendell's voice was quiet when it came, but cold. "Who taught you that tongue?" Esperanza froze. She didn't stand, didn't dare. "Answer me, girl." She whispered low, I only listen. "Only listen," he repeated, stepping onto the porch. His boots creaked like bones. "Who said you had the right to speak it?" "No one, señor. Y por favor, I didn't mean—" He grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, hauled her to her feet. The scrub brush fell from her hand, thudded against the porch rail. Inside, Mrs. Wendell didn't even look up from shelling peas. They tied her to the fence at the far end of the pasture, where no neighbors would hear if she cried. But Esperanza didn't cry, not when the rope bit into her wrists, not when the sweat stung her back, not when Mr. Wendell hissed. "You want to talk like them, you'll learn what happens to uppity tongues." The whip cracked once, then again, then again. She tasted blood in her teeth, bit her cheek to stay silent. He left her there bound to the fence post beneath a sun that boiled. Hours passed. Her knees gave. Flies gathered. Her breath came in hiccups. And still her lips moved. Not loud. Not even sound, just breath. I said it right. The word was right. Cottonwood. River cut. And then, under her breath, one more sentence. one she'd never practiced aloud. "I don't deserve this." Dusk fell slow. A wolf howled in the distant ridge, and from the cotton trail hoofbeats echoed. Slow, one horse, steady, tired. A man approached. Long coat, slouch hat, dust on his shoulders like he'd worn the road itself. Esperanza's eyes cracked open. She couldn't see his face clearly, only the way he stopped, looked at her, didn't move, didn't run. Then he reached down and laid something in the grass at her feet. A knife, not drawn, not pointed, just there. Then he left. She stared at the blade. It gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Her wrists screamed, and so did the part of her that had never dared think of escape. That night, with shaking fingers, Esperanza reached for the handle, and for the first time in her life, cut herself free with words still forming on her tongue. The sky cracked open in slow colors above the plains, lavender bruising into gray. By the time Esperanza crossed the preacher's boundary line, her feet were numb, her wrists raw, and her throat a corridor of ash. The rope had burned a line around her skin, and each step she took was a quiet vow not to go back. She didn't know where the man had gone, the one with the coat that moved like night dust, and the voice that hadn't tried to comfort her. She only knew she was no longer bound, and that somewhere in the dark, someone had watched her bleed, and had left her a knife, not a hand. That meant something. She walked east by memory and got past the broken fence where the oxen used to lurch past the arroyo, where Wendell tossed the chicken's bones. She carried no food, no water, no direction, only the blood-caked rag around her palm and a single sentence clinging to her lips. "They hit me when I spoke." It looped in her head like a hymn with no chorus. The stars had begun to fade by the time she saw movement ahead. A man on horseback, still as stone beside a cluster of mesquites. He wasn't startled to see her. He dismounted, watching her with the patience of someone who'd been waiting not for her, but for her decision. He didn't ask how she'd escaped. She didn't explain. He looked at her wrists, the half-healed lash marks along her back, then handed her a tin flask without a word. She drank, wincing at the warm metallic tang, but she didn't stop until her body remembered how to breathe again. "They'll look for you," he said, voice low like crushed gravel. She nodded. He pointed west toward a crooked ridge where the morning light hadn't touched yet. "I know a place. It won't ask questions." They rode in silence. His horse was lean and dusty, the saddle worn from years, not miles. The man didn't offer a name, didn't ask hers. He rode like someone who'd traveled too long to believe destinations mattered. She didn't trust him, but she didn't fear him either. By dusk, they reached a hunting shack built half into a rock wall. 3 sides, half a roof, and a pile of bones in one corner. The hearth was dead. A raven sat on the rafter, blinking once before lifting into the clouds. He unsaddled the horse and handed her a wool blanket, rough-edged and full of smoke. "We stay a few nights. You don't leave firelight." "Who are you?" she asked. He looked at her for the first time, not scanning, not measuring, just looking. "Cole." The fire cracked low that night. They sat across from each other, shadows rippling against stone. Esperanza nursed a cup of weak coffee, her eyes rimmed red from dust and memory. Cole watched the flame as if it owed him something. "You said nothing," she murmured. "Ain't much worth saying when someone's tied to a post like an animal." She looked down. "You knew I could free myself. I hoped you would." After they ate, he rummaged through his saddlebag and pulled out a book. The cover was torn, the spine wrapped in twine. He slid it toward her. She turned it over. The title half faded but legible. Plain English for the Citizen, 1869 edition. Her throat tightened. Why this? He didn't answer immediately. Just threw another log into the fire. "Because if they beat you for speaking better, make damn sure your next words don't beg." She didn't move. "You think I can learn this? You already did, just not the right way." He pulled out another item, a folded paper notice. Faint ink. Official seal. Read it. She unfolded it, hands shaking slightly, mouthed the words. "Warrant for the arrest of one Daniel Hoyt. Wanted for land fraud and theft." He nodded once. "What they use against you, they use in words. This tells you which ones." She looked back at the book. It felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe she was just tired of holding things in silence. They read together for hours. She stumbled over terms like writ plaintiff affidavit. He corrected her gently, never impatient. When she asked what due process meant, he said, "It's the thing they forget you deserve." At one point she looked up and found him watching her not with pity, but with a kind of fragile respect, like she'd cracked open a door neither of them thought could move. She handed him the book back. "You don't need to teach me. Don't plan to," he replied, stretching his legs out. "Just gonna give you the bullets. How you load 'em's up to you." That night, as she lay curled in her blanket, Esperanza stared at the roof beam, listening to the soft wheeze of Cole's horse outside and the fainter sound of Cole's breath slowing into sleep. There was a scar beneath his left ear, thin, pale, old. Someone had once tried to cut his throat and failed. She wondered who and why he still didn't speak unless it mattered. The shack barely held the wind. It slipped through the split boards like it had a memory to chase, tugging at the corners of the fire they'd built from dead juniper and pine cones. Esperanza sat cross-legged near the flame knees drawn close to her chest, the legal primer spread across her lap. The book had a spine gone soft from use. Faint pencil notes wandered through the margins like another voice had once lived there. She traced one, "Intent is the shape of truth." It was written in a looping, gentle hand, nothing like Cole's blocky strokes. She didn't ask, not yet. Cole sat across the fire, sharpening a flint knife with calm that came from habit, not peace. His eyes reflected orange, but his face stayed hard to read. Esperanza read aloud, "Unlawful possession. Assault by words or act. Inference of threat." The last line made her pause. "How do you assault someone with words?" she asked. He didn't look up. Just turned the blade once more against the stone. "Depends who you are. I was punished for speaking. Is that the same?" Now he looked up. "Sometimes words hit harder than fists. Depends who's listening, and who's scared of what you're saying." The fire cracked. A breeze rattled a loose nail in the rafter. She closed the book, laid it beside her. "The writing in this, it's not yours." He said nothing. "Her name was Leona," she added. Not a question. Cole nodded once slowly. "She was quieter than you, but she had more to say." Esperanza leaned forward, elbows on her knees, waiting. He didn't seem angry, just somewhere else in his mind. "I met her up near Carrizo Springs. She was trading beadwork for coffee and lard. I just brought in 2 men from Fort Stockton, mean bastards with long records. I had a pocket full of cash and no idea what to do with it." He smiled faintly at the memory. It barely lasted a second. "She looked at me like I didn't belong in my own skin. I guess she was right." He let the knife fall to his lap. His hands were still. "We talked in signs for 2 weeks, then broken Spanish. Then she started picking up words from the court papers I carried. She asked questions, wanted to know how to say things. Things no one in her village ever got to say in English." Esperanza's fingers tightened around her blanket. "What kind of things?" Cole's voice dropped. Things like, "That land was ours," or "We never signed that," or "Show me the law." He reached into the satchel beside him and pulled out a folded paper, an old arrest warrant, creased 100 times. She copied every word, took notes like she'd stand trial one day. "Did she?" He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "They said she was teaching children. They didn't like that." "Who?" He looked at the fire. "A preacher, a judge, a storekeeper. Doesn't take many. They killed her." He nodded. "Burned her lean-to. Said it was lightning. But there was no storm that night." Silence hung between them, brittle and absolute. Esperanza leaned forward. "And you? What did you do?" Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. "I buried her hands. Couldn't find the rest." The words landed sharp. Esperanza flinched. "After that, I stopped speaking for a while, kept hunting men. Brought 'em in quiet. Got real good at keeping to myself." He looked at her fully then, and there was no softness in the gaze, only truth. "But then I saw you. And you sounded just like her. Too careful. Too smart." He tossed a small log into the fire. The light leapt up, danced across the book still resting beside her. So I figured, maybe this time the right one learns fast enough to stay alive. Esperanza didn't speak for a long time. Her throat was tight. She never finished the book. No, but you kept it. I didn't know what else to keep. She picked it up again, ran her hand over the worn cover. I want to finish it, not for her, for me. He nodded once, but didn't smile. Then turned the page. They stayed up late that night. She read aloud, and he corrected her when she stumbled not on pronunciation, but on pacing, on tone, on emphasis, on where strength should live inside a sentence. She read until the wind died down and the fire settled into red glow. Before she lay down, she added one line beside Leona's last note. Words don't save, but they can make you worth saving. E. Across the fire, Cole opened his eyes. He hadn't been sleeping, just waiting for something he couldn't name. He looked at the new line. He didn't speak, but his hand rested gently atop the book. The town of Lorena looked like it had been swept together by wind and then forgotten. One crooked saloon, a lopsided church steeple, dust curling in spirals that danced between tired porch posts. Esperanza tugged the scarf higher around her neck as they rode in half to block the sun, half to keep her face from any eye that lingered too long. Cole said little. He pointed once toward a general store with half its sign gone. The rest of the letters read Annie's. She figured it used to say pennies, but even names didn't last out here. He handed her a small list: cartridges, bandages, something for the horse. She took it. Walked in slow. Let her body shrink the way it used to. Inside, the air smelled of kerosene and molasses. Shelves bowed under flour sacks and metal tins. Behind the counter, a pale man with no eyebrows grunted and went back to weighing nails. In the corner, a girl, maybe 10, maybe less, stood clutching a coin. Her cheeks were smudged with dirt. She spoke in halting English, asking for sugar. "One bag. I give you money, see?" The clerk frowned. "You talking to me or praying in gibberish?" The girl froze. Esperanza stepped forward without thinking. "She means, I'd like a small bag of sugar, please." Her voice came out clear. The words soft, but shaped right, like she'd practiced them in the dark and now dared them into light. The clerk turned, eyes narrowed. "She with you?" The little girl looked up wide-eyed. Esperanza nodded once. "Yes, I'm helping her learn." That wasn't true, but it felt like it should be. The man squinted at her a beat longer than was polite, then shoved a tin of sugar forward and grunted. The girl dropped her coin and scurried out. Esperanza didn't follow. She kept her chin down and handed over Cole's list. She paid, said thank you, didn't look up, but someone else did. A woman by the pickled goods gray bun, black gloves, 2 buttons too tight across the chest, watched Esperanza with a squint that sharpened as the light caught her cheek. Then her mouth pulled back in something like surprise. "I know you." Esperanza stiffened. "You worked for the Reverend Wendell. I remember your eyes. You served lemon water on Sundays." Esperanza grabbed the sack, turned for the door. "That girl's a runaway," the woman called. "I heard she burned the chapel floor and ran with a white man." The words cracked like a whip through the store. The clerk dropped his scooper. Another customer turned. Esperanza walked faster. Outside, Cole was tying his bag. His eyes met hers as she approached, steady, unreadable, but sharp. "Trouble?" he asked. Someone remembered. He nodded, nothing else. They rode out of town in silence. By nightfall, they were miles from Lorena. The fire was low. The wind had teeth. Esperanza sat near the flame jaw, tight. "I shouldn't have spoken," she said. Cole didn't look up. "You did what was right. I drew attention. You gave that girl dignity. And now they know." He threw another log on the fire. Sparks jumped like startled fireflies. "Let them know," he said. She stared at him. "Why aren't you angry?" "'Cause I knew it had happened the first time you spoke in daylight." "Then why?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd flinch." She didn't answer. He poured a small tin of coffee, handed it to her without looking. "You didn't." She drank in silence. They didn't sleep long. Before dawn, a knock came. 2 men on mules, dust-coated coats. One carried a leather satchel. "Evenin', or mornin', I guess," said the first. Cole rose, slow hand loose near his holster. "What's your business?" "Looking for a girl." "Small. Brown hair? Speaks too clean. Reverend's missing property. Esperanza's stomach dropped. The second man opened the satchel and pulled out a folded paper. Court summons, he said. Issued by Judge Ansel Wyatt. Girl's been identified as fugitive from Las Piedras under false name and accusations of theft. Cole stepped forward. She got a name on that paper. The man hesitated. Description only. But you know the law. It don't take a name to drag someone in. Cole looked over his shoulder at Esperanza, then back to the men. She'll be there, he said. You'll have your answer. She'd better. It's court in 3 days. Lorena Hall. They rode off without another word. Cole stood a moment longer, the flames painting his back in shadow, then turned to her. You ready to speak in front of people who want you gone? Esperanza's voice was low but steady. I've spoken in front of worse. He tossed a blanket over the fire and sat across from her, sharpening the edge of his blade in long, slow strokes. Then it's time you learn how to speak where it hurts. His hand paused. The knife caught a glint of dawn. You'll need to finish the book. She reached for it. Then teach me the words they can't twist. The fire cracked once sharp as a gunshot. Somewhere deep in the satchel beside him, a folded letter slipped free. Esperanza caught only the edge before he pushed it back down, too fast, too deliberate. Her eyes lifted. Who's the letter for? Cole didn't look at her, didn't answer. Only the fire did. Lorena's courthouse was a square of stone dropped on top of a hill, flanked by mesquite trees and vultures. Esperanza stood at its steps 3 days later, coat buttoned tight against the judgment in the air. The same gray-haired woman from the store sat on a bench outside, lips pursed like a secret she couldn't wait to see punished. Inside, the walls smelled of sweat and polish. A dozen men in work boots leaned forward in stiff-backed chairs. One woman in black lace clutched a handkerchief as if waiting for a tragedy she'd paid admission to. Cole stood behind Esperanza, arms crossed, hat low. He hadn't said much since the letter incident. Just packed his things and made sure she read until her voice stopped trembling. At the front, Judge Wyatt adjusted his spectacles and frowned at the summons. No surname given, no formal counsel requested, he muttered. He glanced up at Esperanza. You speak for yourself. She nodded once. I do. A whisper rippled through the room. State your full name, Wyatt said. She hesitated, then said it fully, clearly. Esperanza Rivera. No flinch, no apology. Wendell took the stand first. His collar wilted from sweat, his voice slick with sanctimony. She disappeared one night. Stole books, religious materials, English readers. We took her in, we fed her. My wife taught her table manners. You whipped her, someone muttered. The judge banged once. Wendell kept going. She was reaching beyond her station, and then ran with that bounty man. His eyes sliced toward Cole. Cole didn't blink. She speaks too clean for a girl who never paid for the words she uses. Wyatt cleared his throat. What precisely is she being accused of? Impersonation, theft, and rebellion. The word echoed louder than it should have. Esperanza stepped forward. Shoes dusty, shoulders square. May I respond? Wyatt gave a nod, perhaps expecting stammering or tears. Instead, she pulled a folded paper from her pocket. According to the Territory Statute 14, Article 3, I was never contracted or paid. There's no record of ownership nor proof of theft. The judge leaned forward. You read this yourself. I did. Who taught you? She let that hang. Then, someone who believed silence was not a virtue. Wendell scoffed. She twists the law like a rattler. Esperanza turned to him. You fear the words I use because they weren't handed to me by your pulpit. You were born to serve. No, she said, voice steady. I was born to speak. And you punished me for remembering how. Gasps. A boot scuffed across floorboards. The judge didn't move for a long while. He tapped a finger against the bench, then sighed. There's no legal ground to detain you. No signed contracts. No named items stolen. He looked to Wendell. You may leave disappointed, sir, but not vindicated. The gavel struck once. The room stayed quiet. Outside, the wind carried mesquite ash and dry sun. Esperanza sat on the stone steps, legs trembling. Not from fear, but release. The kind that makes you shake more than pain. Cole walked down beside her. Didn't speak. Was that justice, she asked. He took a long moment. Then, no, but it was the first time they had to hear you. She opened the book again. Plain English for the citizen thumbed through its worn pages. One line in the margin read, "Words don't change fate. They change how you face it." She didn't know if Leona had written that or Cole. Maybe it didn't matter. Back in the courtroom, Wendell sat alone, his collar damp, his hand gripping the bench too tight. He whispered to no one. She'll forget. They always forget once they're back where they belong. But Esperanza wasn't going back. She was already writing the next sentence. They didn't ride fast after the trial. Cole didn't push the horse like he usually didn't speak much either. The landscape passed in slow blinks. Gravel plains, burnt scrub fence posts slumped like drunks. The wind had lost its bite. Only warmth remained, and silence that didn't ache anymore. Esperanza sat behind him, hands light on the saddle horn. Not from fear, from thought. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. The road bent back toward the ridge, toward the half-collapsed shack that had started everything. Not because it was safe, but because it was theirs for a while. That night she built the fire without asking. He watched her arms crossed. She noticed how he moved slower now, not from pain, but from a kind of unwinding. When the flames rose, she pulled out the book and sat close to the light. He didn't reach for it. She opened to the last marked chapter, testimony in written form. Her finger traced the headline. She began to read aloud slower this time, not for practice, but for him. A statement must not beg for belief. It must walk on its own weight. He raised an eyebrow. "You believe that?" She nodded. "It's how I stood in that room." He didn't smile, but something in his face gentled. "You didn't just stand. You made them sit up straight." Later, after the fire dimmed to coals, she poured 2 tin cups of coffee. She set one near his boot, then sat again closer than before. The quiet between them was thicker than usual, but not heavy. It held things, shared silences, unfinished questions, words unsaid, not because they were hard, but because they were understood already. He finally spoke. "You planning to stay?" She didn't answer right away. "I don't know." He turned the cup in his hands. "You don't owe me nothing. You got your voice. You can go anywhere now." She looked at him, really looked, scars across his forearm. The fraying at his collar, the thin callus on his left index finger writing hand. "That's not what I'm thinking about." "Then what?" "I'm thinking, maybe the voice I found isn't done speaking here." A pause. He stared into the dark like it held something he hadn't earned the right to ask for. "Wouldn't stop you if you left." "I know." The next morning, she was gone. No footsteps, no sound of saddling, just sunlight warming the edge of the blanket where she'd slept. Cole sat up, rubbed his jaw, and exhaled through his nose. It wasn't disappointment. It was habit-breaking. Beside the fire pit, the legal primer was folded shut. A strip of fabric, her scarf tied around it like a seal. He reached for it. Inside the front cover, beneath the old inscription from Leona, she had written something new. "You never asked me to stay. You never asked me to shrink. So I grew instead. And that will always be yours. E." He didn't smile, didn't sigh, just stared at the handwriting, then tore the page out, folded it small, and slipped it into the breast pocket of his coat, where the beat of his heart was slow, steady, and tired in a different way. 2 days later, a storekeeper in a distant town watched a young woman speak fluent English to a frightened boy. "You say it like this," she told him gently. "You say, 'I need help. I have a right to speak.' Go on." The boy repeated it, tongue nervous but clear. The woman nodded once, then turned and walked away, leaving only a dust trail and a copy of plain English for the citizen in his hands. Inside the cover, no name, just one line in small, steady print. "This is yours now. Make them listen." Back at the shack, Cole poured 1 cup of coffee, then another. He left hers across the fire. Let it go cold. The boarder school stood where nothing else wanted to. Wind bruised its walls daily. Dust carved its windows. The old church bell above the door rang lopsided, when it rang at all. But inside was breath and chalk and heat from voices learning to stand. Esperanza adjusted her skirt as she leaned over the youngest girl's shoulder. "Try again," she whispered. "I am not afraid to speak. Go on, say it." The girl said it, not perfectly but strong. In the corner, a boy no older than 9 read aloud from a newspaper with his finger tracing each syllable. Another child recited an oath with a clenched fist. None of them were born here, but all of them would leave knowing how to answer. Esperanza moved among them like a tide. Quiet, but insistent. She corrected gently. Paused, often. Waited longer than most teachers ever did. She didn't teach them to be fluent. She taught them to be undeniable. After class, she sat beneath the lone ironwood tree behind the schoolhouse. Its bark was split, its roots shallow, but it held. She opened her old satchel, the one with frayed leather and a name stitched inside she'd never spoken aloud. Inside, folded into oilcloth, was the scarf. Gray, weather-worn, soft from time. She unfolded it just enough to see the corner. Still carried smoke. From the road, a rider passed now and then. Most didn't look twice, but some slowed, some tipped hats. And some mostly quiet men with tired eyes watched the school as if trying to remember what courage looked like when it was still small. She never looked back, but she felt them. One day near dusk, a boy burst through the classroom door. "Miss Rivera, there's someone asking for you. Says he don't want to come in. Just waitin'." Her chest pulled tight. She dusted off her apron, walked out the front gate. But there was no one there, only a note pinned to the fence post. Folded once. Tied with rough twine. She untied it. Inside a single sentence. "You never owed me your voice, but you gave it anyway. See." She stood there a long time holding the paper like something warm, something breakable. Then she walked inside. That evening, she added a new line to the chalkboard before the students arrived. No one gives you your voice. You build it, word by word. And someday someone listens. She didn't sign her name, didn't have to. The wind carried the rest. And far off, somewhere along a dry ridge where firelight once danced, and silence once taught a man poured 2 cups of coffee. And for the first time in a long while drank both. One for her, one for the echo. What a finale. The sound of Esperanza's voice in that courtroom still echoes like a match struck in the dark. But can words truly free someone born beneath silence? Or do they just teach her how to survive louder? Which moment hit hardest when she stood before the judge and said, "I earned every word. Please let me know in the comments section." Smash. Like if her fight made you breathe a little deeper and drop a comment with the line that stayed in your bones. Next time, saddle up for Ashes for Her Name, where a young woman returns to the charred post that once marked her grave. Her family declared her dead to steal a dowry, and now Maybeth Callahan walks the land as a ghost, with the truth burning in her hands. Watch as she joins forces with a reclusive firesetter to rewrite the past in ink and flame. Expect false graves, buried diaries, and a trial that forces a town to say her name again for the first time. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss a spark of this haunting tale of vengeance, justice, and the girl who would not stay buried.